Welcome to Sober Talk. I'm Dennis and I'm an alcoholic. Sober today thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. If you or anyone you know is struggling with alcohol, please call Alcoholics Anonymous on 1300 222222 or visit their website at aa.org.au. I'll just run through the preamble of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for a membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses or opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety.
My name's Mark, I'm an alcoholic. I've already handed over this talk to God because I was told whenever you have to approach something difficult, hand it over before you get going. So, yeah, I come from a middle-class family. There was no reason I should be different, but I was certainly different in our family. None of my brothers and sisters, my parents, my dad was a rugby player and a boxer, and so I had fear, and I knew it from a very young age. Fear ruled my life until I took that first drink. School, I couldn't concentrate. I had some sort of a fear blockage. If I was asked a question, I just couldn't get the answer. I couldn't access the answer. Mainly what I got from my parents over many years was, what's wrong with you, Mark? And I wish I could have explained what was wrong with me, but it seemed like an overpowering fault anyway. And eventually I came to the day where I picked up that first drink. I actually bought it two at a time without even knowing I was an alcoholic, and they were big flagons of beer, and the other guys in the car sort of said, well, one will get cold while you're drinking the other one. As I grabbed that flagon and it went down, every neurotic, uptight, fearful bone in my body just melted. It's just the most wonderful experience. And from that day, I fell in love with alcohol. Pretty much most of my life was taken up by thinking about it, getting it, drinking it, parties, trouble. I straight away gravitated to the local gangs, and a lot of trouble came home to mum and dad, and they were old school. They didn't say anything unless they meant it. But the time I got to 20, mum and dad actually sort of saw a job in Australia, a place called Canamble, and they rang up and got me that job, and I came home from work and just said, you're flying out tomorrow to Canamble, go and grow up. And I had never lived away from home before, and it was quite a rude awakening, but I still didn't have any ability to say no, but I had a girlfriend, I had all sorts of stuff there, cars and things, and so I found myself on a plane out at Canamble, and I was greeted with the greeting that outsiders sometimes get when they go to country places. I was headed over to the disco in my John Travolta gear with my little thing and whatever else, and sitting there having a couple of drinks. The next thing I was on the floor, somebody come and belted me in the side of the head and knocked me off the stool, and I kind of thought, well, welcome to Australia. I never knew much more about that night, but I just carried on drinking anyway. Happened a few times in my drinking. But yes, the way I put it is that the boy took a drink, the drink took a drink, and the drink took the boy. Because I was only a boy, I hadn't developed emotionally, or was a very immature person, and here I was out in the world, and my best friend was alcohol. So out there, you started early, and you usually got up about 3 o'clock and went in the pub and drank. You just got into that heavy daily drinking thing. I had some blackouts, and I had blackouts before in New Zealand as well. But really, it was there was a lot of anger inside me that my parents had actually sort of sent me away. I actually ended up having my 21st birthday out at Canamble, and I didn't get a card from mum and dad. My other brothers and sisters had all had sort of fancy do's and all sorts of things. And so I had a lot of anger inside me and drank with that anger. And when I got paid off at Canamble, I ended up in King's Cross. I was a 20-year-old in King's Cross, and King's Cross in those days was a pretty violent sort of place. There was a lot of murders going on, a lot of stuff going on. And here was this sort of really gentle person wandering around and amongst all of this things, drinking, going to clubs. I stayed in a place called People's Palace. And then when I ran out of money there, I went to CB Chambers, and then I ended up sleeping in the back of an old Valiant that I had. But I had no conception what it would like to be a confident person, what it would be like to have, confidence in yourself. And I got jobs, and got paid, and woodwork was never something I enjoyed, but I did it for the whole of my drinking career. I met a woman that my brother had dumped. I felt sorry for her, so I thought I'd rescue her. She had come out of a really horrific childhood because she had been put in a girls' home by her mother, who was a lesbian, and was jealous of her when she got to a certain age, so she just got rid of her at home. So she had a lot of problems, and I had a lot of problems, and we got together, and it was just heavy drinking. And that relationship really played such a huge role in me getting to AA. It was so violent in so many ways. She was a very, very jealous girl. Whenever we'd be drinking or whatever, it's quite sort of got used to it, wearing a glass of wine or something. You look at that woman's this. We ended up having children because, like Arthur was saying, I did a runner after it, and another hit and run, another car wiped off it, probably at the 5th or 6th car at that point. Did a runner from Sydney with her to South Australia to stay with her ex-boyfriend's grandmother. So it was a well-planned alcoholic escape. Like in the beginning, this woman, we turned up at her doorstep. So who are you? So we stayed there for a night and a bit, and then we went and lived in a DOS house on Carrington Street, where it was for people with mental illness. I didn't realise that I had it at that point, but so we used to go out and steal fruit at night, and eventually we had children, and my drinking was just getting heavier and heavier. I worked 7 days a week in the building industry, and they're all groundhog days. Wake up in the morning feeling really seedy. Morning smoke at work, having a tomato juice and saying, right, I've got my vitamins for the day. And then 11:30, all of the boozers on the building, the Hyatt Hotel at the time, would sneak out off the site, and we'd go and knock down 6 or 7 pints and a couple of shooters, or if we could, and come back. And we thought we were the kings of the world. While I was doing all this stuff, it's what you might call criminal neglect of my wife and children, because even when I was at home, I was thinking about alcohol and swapping bottles, hiding thing for it. Yes, it was certainly the love of my life until the family was gone, the money was gone, the car was gone. I was living in the Pier Hotel at Glenelg with a grand $50 a night room. I was shaking like a leaf. I carried a spare set of underpants around because of daily diarrhea. Weighed about 7 stone. I looked at the ground, and my whole lot looked anybody in the eyes in case they saw what I felt inside. The shame, humiliation, so the way I was living and what I was in one of those rooms one night. I just dropped to my knees. The first time in my life, and I had a lot of reason to drop to my knees. Been locked up, beaten up, all sorts of things over the 15 years of my drinking. I dropped to my knees and just said, if you're out there, help me. Was no flash of light or whatever. In fact, I was sort of quite disappointed because I got up the next day and I was still frightened, but I had to go to a place called Archway Port. There's a rehab. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm out of order a little bit. This is quite important to me. Anyway, and this is a spiritual concept meeting, was for some reason my wife, who had a restraining order on me and hated my guts, rang Archway Port on my behalf. And they rang Huey from Glenelg, and he came to the Pier Hotel and asked me if I wanted to stop drinking. So that prayer had happened. I didn't think anything. God was moved. So I stayed sober for a couple of days. I went down to Archway, and Roy Bryant said, you need to be sober 2 days to sort of get in here. I was a heavy daily drink. Man, I thought at the end of those 2 days, I was shaking like a leaf, but it was sort of a huge feat, 2 days for me. I'd never done that before in a long, long, long time. But on the final day when I was due to go there, I went down to do some laundry stuff, which was unusual in itself. And while I was doing it, really difficult to explain, Arthur explains it better than anyone I know, was filled with undescribable ecstasy. It was like somebody inside me said, Mark, it's okay. It's beautiful. It's almost skipped out of that joint. My car had been stolen a couple of days before I walked into the Pier Hotel. The police have just rang us for a car has been found down at Brighton. It had all my tools in it, all the money in it. It was down there, and I hopped in my car and headed off to Archway Port and met my emotional relatives. And if God is sort of in your life, a lot of it for me has been done through the people that He has put in my path. He put a guy called Fast Eddie in my path. And Fast Eddie was had issues, mental issues of sorts, but he was a meetings person. And for me, when I stopped drinking, I reverted back to the 14-year-old boy afraid of everything. For me, stopping drinking was like the start of the jail sentence. Or like, I kind of thought stopping drinking would be like being freed from jail. But for me, there was ism. All the fear, the anxiety, all of the stuff that alcohol puts to sleep was back. And I couldn't sleep. Get about 2 hours a night. A trap set on my door and had someone come in and try to rape me in the rehab. I had my mind spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. What can I do about my marriage? When will I see my kids again? What am I doing here? How is this sort of going to work? Millions of questions. Just they used to call it a can of worms in AA, but mine was a can of worms. And somehow I managed to stay there and partnered up with Eddie. He was a meetings person, so I became a meetings person. He was one of only 2 people doing meetings in those days, and I don't know what happened to Eddie in the end, but I felt that special love that alcoholics have for each other, special bond that is just such a beautiful thing. You know, it's just such a powerful thing too, because I'm an isolate. Out there, I live on my own. Nobody knows what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, whatever. I was just stone-faced and nobody got in. But, you know, you come to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and you're asked to sort of get up and share. It's a really overwhelming thing because I didn't even have the faintest clue who I was. I never really had the idea of who I was. So I did what I had always done, and I copied people. I took a part of Broken Hill Jack, I took a part of Eddie, I took a parts of all sorts of people, and I thought AA was about being good. So I became really good. And in those days, they said, fill your car up if you've got a car. I had an old piece of crap, Kingswood, full of Hungry Jack's whoppers and Coke after meetings, meals. And a guy called Peter T just came up to me one night and he said, I'm going to be your sponsor. And I said, okay, because I was a people pleaser anyway. And we learned about a little guy called Leo. Leo had lost the vocal cords and had peripheral neuritis like me, and when he walked, he had to swing his legs. It was a little Italian man, and we went and picked him up from North Adelaide in this room he was staying at, and he became one of my cozy carlo. Leo, then we got Big Paul, who really didn't want to do meetings, but the woman he was living with made him. So whenever I rang him up, I'm eating my dinner and Bella in the background, you just get out there, you know. And then we had Rockabilly Brian, the last of our crew, who was a friend of Fast Eddie, who was the initial man who brought me to meetings. And we were being called the Looney Carload. I'm sure when we turned up at meetings, people sort of thought, oh God, here they are again. I remember Stan sort of saying to me once when he saw the old Stan from down north, saw my car pull up there one night, old Kingswood, and he thought, who's this parking in the AA car park? And out hopped Broken Hill Jack, Norma, and Blind Alan, and they were my three people. I became like a taxi for the old people. I love the old people of AA. I had never ever sort of had the slightest inclination to can them. I thought I felt safer with them than I'd ever felt in my whole life. I felt safer with them than my parents, my own family, whatever. And they loved me. And I knew I was being a really powerful love because there were no strings attached. All those people wanted to do was for you to succeed in life, you to stop drinking. And they were passionate speakers in those days. There was no sort of political correctness. You had people getting up and contradicting each other and telling you, this is what I believe. You know, you can take it or leave it. So here I was in AA, sort of being good and running people around, and Peter and I started bumping beginners, and Peter pushed me out front, and I'd be shaking like a leaf. I'd have a glass of water, and I'd be going everywhere, and just really detested being pushed up front. I'm the sort of person who liked to hide away on the back. Even Broken Hill Jack, who became my sponsor over Peter, he put me in the front row. He said, you sit there, you concentrate as well as you can for the whole 90 minutes. You look at the speaker, you listen with your ears, and your heart will tell you whether you've got an Elkie in front of you. And so I became that. Used to be Mansfield Park. You couldn't see the speaker for the smoke anyway. It was a small prefab. Everybody smoked in AA. I was smoking about 2 packets a night and I was a non-smoker. So there you were sitting in the front row, sort of doing my Jack. My mind would be 50 seconds on what the speaker was saying, and back into my own life, my own problems, and another few seconds darting around counting bricks. 90 minutes, all the meeting, that seemed like an eternity to sort of have to sit still and listen to the meeting. But they were building, AA was building you tolerance for some people in AA I've heard 1,000 times, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 times, but I still listen to the same because they were really, really smart people. Broken Hill Jack was one of the smartest and most observant men that I have ever met. He had the first time I actually went up to Jack, I kind of was afraid of him and thought he would say, what are you doing? Come up here, you whatever. But I went up to Jack and he said, oh, hello, Mark. He knew, wow. But geez, I didn't even think you existed. And then he said, I can remember you speaking to your Maxwell and talking to your wife and your kids. He said, how's that? Talking, they're actually listening to what I have to say. No one ever listens to what I have to say. And I very rarely listen to what anyone else had to say either. But that was one of the most sort of, we're going to talk about sort of spiritual journeys. It's the restoration of Mark's spirit. The end of the reading on acceptance, it says absolutely nothing's in God's will by mistake. Now, I had a huge amount of stuff going on. I had an ex that was being visited by some of the guys from Archway Port, trying to get in with her and telling the lies about what I was doing. But I was filling my car up every night and just doing meeting and treating mail. I wouldn't hurt either. It took a whole year to ring me. So I waited for that call for a year in Archway Port. 11 and a half months of my I will never drink again written in my little black book. The phone went and that was what I've been waiting for. She said, come home. You can come home to Vanessa, my daughter's birthday party. And I went with her. And after about 3 days of living with her, she said, I liked you better when you were drinking. Without alcohol, I was just like this. I was saturated by it. I needed to be saturated by it. If ever a brain needed to be washed, it was mine. And I didn't mind having it washed because living with a dirty brain, not without alcohol to quiet it anyway, it wasn't for me. So anyway, eventually I was working on the Grand Prix at the time, on the Grand Prix VIP huts. I was in charge of putting those up, and I knew they were going to be full of booze, but we went to the Grand Prix and I had 2 cans of beer with her. If she doesn't care, what should I? Nothing happened. At 5 o'clock the next morning, wide awake, I have to get down to those huts and get all 11 hours of doing 2 meetings a day, just about saturated by it, surrounded by sober people, and 2 cans of beer unlocked it, and 5 hours later I'm down there putting all the wine in one shed and having like sort of, I don't know if you have that feeling of like free booze and a bit of this and a bit of that, and got absolutely smashed at work. Hopped in my car, always ran up West Terrace. There's a little yellow car in front of me turning onto West Terrace, but they had to stop for some reasons. Bang, bonnet up, guard out, fear back. I'm going to jail. If I get caught here, I'm going to jail. I back off there. The lady saying, screaming, we've just come from a funeral. And I backed off there. The guard was against the wheel, and some guy came out of panel beater shop. I drove down the wrong side of the road and came out of panel beater shop and pulled the guard off. And I drove home. So the fare returned. 11 and a half months of doing AA meeting. One day after picking up a drink, I was back in hell. I was the secretary of the Kilburn meeting, which was at Enfield at that particular time. I had to sneak up there with this old car, drop off all the gear just before meeting, so I'm waiting until someone turned up to pick it up. And yeah, on I went. But as the journey's gone on, from that initial prayer to God, and I'd say which was a pretty much a childlike understanding of a relationship with God, I started praying every night. And the only way I could pray was to actually get on my knees. But laid in bed, I couldn't get through the serenity prayer without my mind shooting somewhere else. I just couldn't stop it from doing that. So I would symbolically get on my knees and pray to God for help. And it really didn't feel like I was getting that help. The first year of sobriety, I think I was probably traumatized and thing. I did a meeting every night. I didn't know what was going on. My emotions were everywhere. I just didn't know what was happening to me. I was trying to pray to God, and it seemed like God had abandoned me. But the journey had started, I guess. I think it's Arthur who says, watch out if your life is too calm and peaceful. God's forgotten you. Well, mine was never that. Not long after I got sober and quite well back in Archway, my wife came into AA and ran off with the guy I was helping in AA. That sort of really, the resentment got going, put it that way. I had 2 children. My wife was out there living her own life. I'm not blaming my wife. Years later, I'm talking about years later, 25 years of recovery later, I realized that I should never have been with that woman. I didn't love her. I only wanted sex. And, I deprived her of a big chunk of her life by marrying her under the pretense that I loved her. Now, that's the sort of stuff that comes up sometimes later on in recovery. But in that early recovery year, she ran off with this guy. He left AA. I never saw him again. Steve was, but there's lots of Steve, so don't worry, I'm not giving away anyone's anonymity. And I started the journey. I really came to enjoy meeting. I enjoyed what happened to me during the meetings. Like, with our carload of people all the way there, it was a bloody child support and taxation and speed cameras and cops and drama. And we'd sit in that meeting and we just got to happen. Peter'd say, let's go to happen tonight, and I'd have to pay for it, and we'd go. But I didn't get a resentment. We'd all go into that meeting, shitty, unhinged alcoholics, all just fighting for our lives. It's a real, you're fighting against an entity that's been around since the beginning of time, killing people. It's powerful if you got it. We go into this meeting, it's like, you go in there shitty and come out a lot calmer, in a better mood. And quite often it was so calm, row your boat. And for a group of guys like us, we were really a strange carload of people. We all came from different sort of backgrounds. But funnily enough, that carload did get a meeting a night every year. We all stayed long-term sober. Just got that grounding, that spiritual bank to prepare you. A lot of tempers. That's when the fun really started. I can remember my sponsor, Mary W., being at Bronx Police Sobriety. I think it was about 2 years and shaking like a leaf and hanging on for dear life. And then got up there and sort of said, I'm 14 years sober and this has been the worst. And I'm sitting there thinking, how could you be 14 years sober? That's the worst part of your recovery, I'm sort of like there. But when I got to 14, I realized that you're starting to get honest with yourself, and it hurts, it really hurts, a lot of stuff. I had all sorts of things. All of those children that I basically neglected as a father when I drank all ended up with, severe mental and emotional problems. I tried to be a better father for them when I was sober. I had a little 1-bedroom flat, and I used to have American weekend, but I didn't really have any tolerance at all for children in those times, so it's quite hard for them. Yeah, I did my best. I paid my child support. I was offered a pinch, but I didn't take it. Went back to work and paid the child support and did the best I could. And really, most of my recovery is just that. I just have done the best I could. Further down the road, when my daughter is 15, she gets in with a pedophile guy that's a drug dealer, and he takes over her life with drugs. And she had a little boy called Tobias, and she'd already had a daughter, Katie. And one day I just got the call from her, said, Tobias is in hospital. He's on life support. Turned out that sort of the boyfriend and her who were on ice, and you'd spent most of the day in bed anyways, the boyfriend had been left alone with him. He had shaken baby, bashed his head against the wall, and he had put him outside. Anyway, I had to go down to that hospital and be with that little boy. Everybody else that was on drugged, whatever. But I was sober AA, so yeah. When eventually the time came and they turned off life support, I was holding that little boy, just praying for him and letting him know that, someone cared for him, or someone who cared and thought that he was special. it was really difficult because at that time I was there building a Maccabi house, and he didn't leave my side the whole damn time. He knew that this person wasn't going to harm him. I'd come there about 2 weeks before I started the Cubby house, and they were in bed, sort of, if you know anything about maths and that, they were in bed a lot of the time. And he came up and he grabbed hold of my leg, and he just held on my leg, and he had a wet nappy on and whatever. And I went and got her up, but I don't know whether she got up and saw to him. But after he was killed, I just felt so ashamed of myself that I didn't pull that kid out of there. He came to me and just held on my leg, hung to me, and I didn't want to cause her trouble. I took the easy path, and I've had to live with that one. That you have to live with a lot of things in recovery, a lot of choices that you make that are painful. So, as a result of that, I was working in my own little business. I'd done a nice small business scheme. I was working as a carpenter, and I got the call sort of 2 days after Tobias had died that Katie was going to be put in foster family, and would I be interested in coming to the meeting? Katie was the little girl. She had lived in amongst all that stuff, and so I went to the meeting, and no one else put their hand up, so I put my hand up, and I took Katie. She was 5 years old, very, very thin little shy girl, really sort of badly impacted by what she saw going on, and I had to stop working at that time and become a dad to this little girl, and it was difficult. It was really difficult. It was sort of, I didn't have money in place or anything really going on, and so I fathered her, and sometimes I was a bit sharp, I suppose, but I looked after her for a year and a half. I studied in Victoria in that time, an AOD, and eventually my daughter passed all the tests, and she took Katie. Later on, she was to lose her all over again. So what happened when Tobias died, the boyfriend was the person who was left with him, and was, in my mind, obviously the person that had killed him. And my daughter, being so sick on drugs, had stayed with that guy, had 2 more children with him. So we had Katie, Malachi and Shiloh. Malachi and Shiloh were the 2 children she had to him. And so, yes, as a father, it was very difficult to deal with the fact that when eventually she lost all of her kids, we took Malachi and Shiloh on, Karen, my wife, and I. So we took these 2 little kids on that were really badly damaged and loved them as best we could. My daughter was still out there sort of with this loony bin sort of guy doing drugs. All sorts of horrible stuff happened to her as well. So yes, we'd done a few years of looking after children, and this is all, if you think about the God component of things, absolutely nothing happens from God's will by mistake. God, got me sober, and I could be a dad to them and help out these kids. As far as being able to cognitize holding that little kid, even today, I don't know how I did, but I did. Yes, so I had a couple of relationships after that. In the fellowship, I won't say in the fellowship because Broken All Jack said to me was, Mark, if you have a relationship in the fellowship, lose my number. Because they knew how precious everybody was in AA in those days. And Jack had passed on at that point, and I decided that I was lonely when I had a relationship. It wasn't a good relationship. It was 2 alkies together, a lot of stuff going on. And we're at the point of calling it quits after a year or so. It just didn't make anybody happy. And she was pregnant. There's no way me, after being probably 10 years in AA, wanted an abortion. My other wife could have bought it. So, part of me was thinking, I'd already done sort of 12 years of child support. I was going to do another 18 of it. Part of me, and the other part was saying, I'm not going to let this, So God gave me a gift. He gave me Billy. I was sober at Lowell McEwen. When Billy popped out, she had the umbilical cord around her neck, and the doctor said, make yourself useful. And he handed me Billy and cut the cord. For the first time in my life, I felt connected at level. I had never connected to anything at any real level. But Billy, and I got a chance to be a dad. So something I thought was going to be really bad about child support and whatever else turned out I got a second chance. And I did spend a lot of time with Billy. I did know what colours she liked. I did buy her a horse and go and sit out there in the paddock every Sunday while she got angry trying to lunge this horse and ride this horse. I saw Billy taking her swimming lessons, and just brought me to tears. The guts this little girl had, arms and legs flying everywhere, and it was just such a powerful thing. That love for Billy sort of saved my life in years ago. Billy is growing up now, and she's 26, and she came to the fellowship herself off her own bat, and she did a couple of years, but at the moment she's out. I think she could do it another way, as a psychologist, psychiatrist, or whatever else. But along the way, there haven't been too many nights where I haven't said, thanks, mate. There have been too many nights where I've walked into any situation without knowing that God was walking with me. I used to hear that thing in the Bible, David and Goliath, and David just turns around and says, I didn't go in there alone, I went in with the Lord. And I have walked into some really, really tragic, painful. I have a fellow friend called Des in the fellowship. Des was a guy with the Kadena, and I'd met him I was working with ACS at the time. I met him at Northeastern Hospital. He was brand new, and I met his mum, and I befriended him, and I loved the lovely person. I've got 5 minutes. I loved Des, and he rang me every day for for 8 years, and he brought people down to meeting, and we spent a lot of time together and had a lot of fun together. Probably the first man that I had ever sort of loved in that kind of way. We had fun together. He came to me one night and gave me a big cuddle and said, "I love you," and went and took his own life. Broke my heart again. But having a broken heart is not the end of the world, because I made a deal with God right at the beginning, sober. However, I was with my been of service. Recently, 2 years ago, we had 6 deaths: my son, my father, my mother-in-law, Janine, my wife's Janine's mum. And I went into grief, just went into like a dark room. It was like the power was out, and I didn't know when it was going to be turned to God and whatever. But it was really a sad heart. Grief is, I know it's about the way I love people, and I do love people, but it's all come from the love I have, how that didn't happen anywhere else. My family doesn't even know me. None of them wanted to know me after I got sober. I rang my sister recently and sort of said, "Oh, I've just been 35 years. And she said, "Oh, you still have the odd beer though, don't you?" So just don't get a saving grace because God gives me you to get it. Nobody ever sort of understood the complexities of me or each other and how difficult it is to stay on this path, that we all need to support each other and love each other. And, Norma, I'll finish on Norma's thing. Norma's thing was, or one of her things, Norma had a lot of things, all those old time said, she said, AA is the healing pond, because as we know, alcoholism is an illness. The AA is a healing pond, and every time you sit in that healing pond, the diamond is getting a little polished. That every time, the more and eventually out comes your beautiful. Eventually you realize that you are a good person, that you can love, that you are good, clean, wholesome citizen. It takes so long to feel that way about myself. I was so far at war with myself. I hated myself that much. Those first 10 or 15 years, it's so difficult sort of living with yourself in that state. But AA, probably more likely that first prayer I made to God helped me. Here's a range, and exactly how it had to be for me. And I don't have any, I think it's just magnificent where I am today. I have a beautiful wife, a happy, bubbly little woman who's look after anybody. She's a cuddler. I had never cuddled before I met her because I never cuddled as a kid. She's a cuddler. She just come up and give you a big cuddle. She's about that big, but me loves. Now she just loves everybody. We've got my 32-year-old schizophrenic sort of son who had been out in the streets on drugs for a long time, and Karen is like, he's 6 foot to size and big, and there's little Karen, 5'2", cuddling him and talking to him in the kitchen and loving him, So if you've got anything to say, allow your hearts to open, cop whatever comes your way and stay sober. I think there's one of my cliches I hang up down at Salisbury sort of says, there is no problem in life that a drink will make better. And over the years, I haven't thought about drinking, but I might have thought about necking 2 times. It's been quite hard. But thanks to you all, here I am, high quality life, tired, golfer, bowler, fisherman, father, husband, all of that stuff off the cards the way I came into AA. And I'll even say that I'm reasonably sane most of the time. So thanks for listening.
AA has more than 2 million recovering alcoholics throughout the world. In Australia, there are about 18,000 members. They meet in over 2,000 local meetings spread around the country. Meetings range in size from a handful in some areas to hundreds or more in larger communities. And once again, if anyone you know is struggling with alcohol issues, please call Alcoholics Anonymous in 1300 222222 or visit their website on aa.org.au.